Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Wilton Park. So I'm Christina Henley. I'm Lead Policy Officer here at Wilton Park, and it's a real pleasure to welcome you here to Whiston House today. I apologise for the weather, but it's, authentic January in the UK, so welcome. Thank you for travelling to be with us today and to participate, especially those of you that have had really long journeys. We really appreciate it. And thank you for giving us the gift of your time as well. So I recognise some faces, but how many of you have been here to Wilton Park before? So we've got a few hands up around the room. That's great. So welcome back to those of you that have been before, and a very warm welcome to those of you with us for the first time as well. So for those of you who don't know Wilton Park, we're part of the UK government's Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office. Wilton Park was set up just after the Second World War as part of the post-World War II reconciliation and peace-building effort in Europe. So actually yesterday, we celebrated our 80th birthday. So that's 80 years of people coming through these doors to try and address important and difficult issues. So it was we all had cake as well, which was great. So I'm delighted to have the opportunity to work with you over the next 3 days or so for the SIDS Future Forum 2026. And we have the opportunity to discuss a range of topics from common challenges identified in the Samoa pathway 12 years ago and why they're still present in SIDS today, emerging issues affecting SIDS due to geopolitical shifts, accelerating climate change and other global and regional trends, as well as advancing and lessons from progress in sustainable development across SIDS regions. And finally, new challenges SIDS could face during the implementation of the Antigua and Barbuda Agenda for SIDS. So I hope that our conversations over the coming days can be as open, fluid and constructive as possible. You may have noticed or not, we do have a camera in the room. So this afternoon sessions and the first session tomorrow morning will be recorded and on the record. So I will then indicate to you tomorrow at around 10:15 when we go off the record and will be under the Wilton Park protocol. So everything said today and tomorrow up until 10:15 is being recorded. So today we're going to be settling in and we're going to hear some opening remarks followed by hearing an overview of the changes in global affairs since SIDS 4. The SIDS 4 conference, and finally we'll have an introduction to the chapters 1 and 2 of the State of SIDS report. So while today it may be more listening, tomorrow we will branch out into smaller group work, which will be very participatory. So please make yourself at home while you're here. We have the house and the grounds to ourselves. Just a couple of final admin points before I introduce our opening speakers. So do carry your room key card, as the front door is always locked for security and you can't always get into the building without it. So if you're in an outside room, just make sure you have your key card on you. Whiston House is a fully non-smoking space, but you can smoke outside at the back through the orangery. We do not have any planned fire evacuations or tests scheduled while you're here. So if you do hear the fire alarm, day or night, please exit the building as quickly as possible and move to our meeting point, which is on the front lawns. So the fire exits in this room at the end of each of the room, and then there's a window behind you that you can exit through as well. So with that out the way, we can begin. We're now going to hear a welcome from our partners for this event. So we have the Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office and the Resilient and Sustainable Islands Initiative at ODO Global. We have a very kindly pre-recorded message from Minister Chris Elmore, who is very disappointed that he could not join in person, and that Minister Elmore is our Parliamentary Under-Secretary of State for Multilateral Human Rights, Latin America and the Caribbean at the Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office.
Good morning. I'm sorry I can't be with you today, but let me begin by warmly welcoming you all to the UK and to this very special place, Wilton Park. If you've been here before, you'll know it's magic. It's a place for honest conversations and practical action, this time centred on SIDS priorities. On my recent visit to Jamaica after Hurricane Melissa, I was struck by the remarkable resilience of its people, the professionalism of the responders, and the strength of the government's preparation for such a powerful storm. Sadly, such disasters no longer feel rare. While British investments have helped, I know that we must go further. That means building a more modern partnership where SIDS lead on economic and climate resilience, with the UK backing you through resources and strong advocacy. That's why in the Savannah commitment we recognise the need for a new approach to development finance, an approach rooted in genuine partnership and focused on what delivers most impact. Our new SIDS strategy sets out 3 priorities. First, working together closely to improve climate adaptation, aid effectiveness, governance and human rights. Second, reforming the international finance system. And third, helping you grow resilient economies while protecting nature and the ocean. Now, you all know the agenda well, so I won't go through it, but I want to emphasise that this is a rare chance for us to step back, look ahead and focus on what will really make a difference for SIDS. You will be in safe hands of Tim Hemmings, our SIDS envoy, and our partners at the RESI. I look forward to the outcomes and to working together on the next phase of our partnership with you. Thank you.
That's great. So I'm now going to hand over to Tim Hemmings, who's our Special Envoy for Small Island Developing States at the Foreign and Commonwealth Development Office. Over to you, Tim.
Thank you, Tina, and good afternoon, everybody. Or should I say, as my Minister, the boss, said, good morning. And if your boss says it's the morning, then it's the morning. I just wanted to start by saying a huge thank you, first of all. It's great to see so many of you here. I know that travelling to the UK in January is always a pleasure. The weather is unseasonably cold. We should be having a barbecue normally. But honestly, it shows, I think, the importance of the issues that we're here to discuss and the great work that you're all doing. So thank you very much. As Tina said, my name is Tim Hemmings. I'm still the relatively new UK Special Envoy for Small Island Developing States. I think it's really important that the UK has a special envoy fulfilling this role. We have some other envoys from other parts of the world as well, because it shows the importance of the issues that you all face to us in the UK. And I hope that we can consider ourselves a long-term partner for SIDS in helping to address those issues that you face. As the Minister said, we have, as of today, a newly published strategy for SIDS that we can talk about more as we go through the next 3 days. But again, that gives us a long-term platform to build on in trying to work together to address the kind of issues that we talk about, whether they're issues of climate adaptation, reforming international finance, advocacy for SIDS in global fora, but also growth, which I think is one of the things that I hope we can talk about in more detail as we go forward. I'm quite new in the job and I have much more expert members of the team around me, so I really see my role over the next few days as listening. Partnership is really about listening, and it'd be great to hear from all of you about the challenges you're facing, what we can all do together to try and help. They won't be the same, they won't be universal. We recognise that this bit's on camera, but the geopolitical situation is complex at the moment. And we need to be able to talk about that in an open and frank way so that we can identify ways forward. You'll appreciate that the UK, like many other countries, is also in a relatively challenging position fiscally. So we're looking at how we can adapt our development spend and what we do working with you for the future as well. So again, those are themes, they're big themes for all of us that we'll want to talk about in more detail. I think it's great that we're going to hear more from RESI and talk about the State of SIDS report, because I think that's a key part of that listening. It's about finding the common challenges and common themes that SIDS face in very diverse geographies and working out kind of ways forward on that. But then also that we have a deep dive at the latter end of this get-together, which looks at the ocean and specific issues around the ocean where SIDS have real advantages and real good practice that we can help share amongst us, but also common challenges as well. And so I really hope that we can harness that and hopefully make the most of COP31 with its sort of slightly split focus between Turkey and Australia into a really important moment for the Pacific and for SIDS there as well. So that's the objective. Being British, we're quite transactional about this stuff, so we'll be coming up with a kind of action plan and a way forward, because the conversation is fantastic, but actually it's about the implementation. It's about what we then do together that really counts. And then we'll hear a bit more about the Wilton Park protocol and how things work in a format like this. But I already know from meeting some of you in New York, or some of you at the World Bank Annuals or at COP, that we have great conversations, but they're always rushed. We're always sort of rushing off to the next thing. It's always really busy. The whole point about here is we have time. We can step back, we can be frank with each other, and that's the one sort of bit of advice I would have about making the most of a situation like we've got over the next 2 or 3 days. So a huge thank you to the team who have helped organising it. A huge thank you, especially those of you who have come a long way. I've already met people who have come from Melbourne, from Auckland. We should probably have a prize for the person who's come from furthest away. But it really is appreciated, and I hope you enjoy the next 2 or 3 days. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tim. That's great. I'm now going to hand over to Emily Wilkinson, who's the Principal Research Fellow and Director at RESI. So over to you, Emily.
Thanks very much, and welcome everyone to the SIDS Future Forum 2026. I want to say just a couple of words about RESI and then about the event over the next few days, just as background. So RESI was set up in 2021, roughly, maybe a little bit before. During the pandemic, we were having a few discussions about the need to set up an interdisciplinary global scientific advisory network to help support and advance SIDS agendas, and critically to influence international processes that shape SIDS' future. So we really saw a gap and a need for that. And today, I'm really happy to say that RESI is a cross-regional network of almost 100 affiliates with a collective mission to ensure that small island developing states are not only represented in global decision-making, but actively shape it. And I think we can all agree that that is an important mission. We do that, our contribution to that is by producing knowledge and evidence through reports and policy briefs, communications products, including documentaries, and you'll see one of them this evening for those who want to stay up to watch that, as well as podcasts and opinion pieces. We run events like this to bring together different stakeholders. Also a training course which started this year, the Advanced Leadership course for SIDS professionals, and through a number of knowledge exchange activities, webinars, and other sort of platforms for discussion. So we ran a SIDS Future Forum before in 2024. March 2024 was the first ever SIDS Future Forum. It was held in New York, and some of you here will have been at that event. That brought together over 300 participants in person and online to debate some of the cutting-edge policy-focused research on SIDS in the lead-up to the SIDS 4 conference in Antigua and Barbuda. So this is the next SIDS Future Forum following the SIDS 4 conference, now focused on implementation. But the discussions there in advance of the SIDS 4 conference were really focused on the zero draft of the ABAS, and based around a series of working papers which were produced by our affiliates. And those sort of broad thematic areas haven't changed, so the discussions over the next couple of days will also be based around the 5 sort of thematic areas of the ABAS. At that event, the first SIDS Future Forum in 2024, participants really emphasised the need for greater interregional collaboration and knowledge sharing, institutional strengthening, and new supportive governance mechanisms, enhanced voice, accountability and transparency. And those are some of the things that we want to bring through having these discussions, through having a biennial SIDS Future Forum, but also through a State of SIDS report, which we're going to be talking about over the next few days, which will come out in May this year. And there'll be subsequent reports every 2 years on the same issues, so that we can really provide a sort of monitoring, tracking process of implementation of the ABAS. The report will complement the monitoring evaluation framework for the ABAS, which is being established. But really the aim is to kind of get underneath some of the changes so we can really understand why things are happening, if there are enduring challenges, why that is the case, what new emerging challenges may be coming out and are being reflected in the literature, but also propose some short-term concrete measures that can help set SIDS on a path towards ambitious outcomes by 2034. So over the next 2 days, you're going to be presented with these top-line messages from each of the chapters of the State of SIDS report. Some of them will be challenging and provocative, and there will be opportunity to provide feedback on what you've heard, and debate in groups. We'll have some breakout groups to discuss the key messages that need to come through in the report. You'll also have an opportunity to craft a summary for policymakers to ensure there is a short version of the report that can be communicated at the highest level to inform SIDS global advocacy on sustainable development. So there'll be a couple of sessions where we'll be working in groups to develop this summary for policymakers. And I just want to kind of reiterate that this is not a UN process, it's a multi-stakeholder dialogue, mostly under Chatham House rules. There are just plenary sessions this evening and tomorrow morning that we are videoing so that we can share with a wider audience. But after that, and all the breakout group discussions will be off the record. So it's really designed for us to be able to set aside institutional affiliation and reflect on the challenges and solutions from your vast knowledge and expertise. So yeah, for those of you who attended the first SIDS Future Forum in New York, we're very happy to welcome you back to a different setting to engage again in this kind of conversation. I'm very grateful to those attending for the first time for your commitment to coming to rainy Sussex in the middle of winter without really knowing what's going to happen over the next few days, but hopefully you will find the process and the discussions informative and useful. Thanks.
Thank you all. And yes, as Emily and Tim have already introduced themselves, we won't ask them to do it again. So as we move into our first session, I'm going to be using first name basis with everyone's permission. It just helps it keep flow more nicely. Everyone is sat around the same table, so just to be aware, I won't be using any titles. So our first session now is called Navigating the Now. So the last 2 years have seen significant changes in geopolitics and the multilateral system, which undeniably affect the ABAS implementation. So this first session will provide a brief overview of changes in global affairs since the 2024 SIDS conference. And to start us off, I'll now pass us over to Matt Bishop, who's co-director of the Resilient and Sustainable Islands Initiative. So over to you, Matt. Thank you.
Thanks, Tina. Hi, everybody. So I've been asked to give a bit of context and kind of think about how the world that we find ourselves in might be changing and how we might make sense of that. So I'm probably not going to talk about SIDS very much. I'm going to try and give us a bit of a framework for thinking about how SIDS are going to navigate this changing world. For those of you that were at the first Future Forum in New York, and a fair few people in this room were, you might remember that our colleague Jack Corbett, who will be joining us shortly, gave a keynote over a glass of wine at the end of that lovely day that we had. And in it, he kind of laid out the argument in our book, our collective RESI book, which I'm sure many of you have seen, called Sustaining Development in Small Islands. And I think it's worth just recapping very briefly what the argument in that book was. The first thing, the kind of overarching claim that we make in the book, is that the post-1945 liberal international order, which often gets a bit of a bad press from academics in particular, was in some ways much kinder to SIDS than is often recognised, particularly given the kinds of world that preceded it. SIDS did pretty well, by and large, in the era of independence. It wasn't perfect, of course, but many generated quite good levels of growth, as we all know. They were full participants in the multilateral system, and they were able to pursue the kinds of demands that they have. And we suggest that this was because the liberal international order, the post-1945 order, was permissive, it was democratic, and it was open. And it was also orderly because there were these shared rules and norms that everybody, by and large, bought into. They were sometimes honoured in the breach, but for the most part, there were key underpinning norms that everybody agreed to, broadly speaking. One of these is sovereign equality, the idea being that the very smallest countries in the world enjoyed the same sovereign status within the UN as the very largest. Another one was non-intervention. Again, sometimes honoured in the breach, but broadly speaking, the idea that states should not have their sovereignty transgressed by outsiders. And the right to development, which is crucial, that states had a right to be able to set their own development agenda and progress that development agenda. And we suggested in the book that this order might be breaking down, or there are certainly challenges to it. And we sketched out these three different scenarios. One of them was a return of what might be called a self-help system, i.e. the return of great power politics, potentially even the return of imperialist agendas, obviously very problematic. The kind of counterpoint to that was a more muscular form of liberalism, i.e. a re-intensification of the post-1945 liberal order, where more and more power became invested in multilateral institutions. And then the other was a kind of enhanced multilateralism, i.e. taking the kind of order that we've got now and improving it and making it better. And in the book we argued that both the self-help system, i.e. the return to great power politics, and the kind of more muscular liberalism, both of those were problematic in different ways for SIDS, because in different ways they would constrain the choices that many SIDS have had and enjoyed in the second half of the 20th century and into the 21st century. And we advocated for a kind of enhanced, improved multilateralism, which my presumption is most people in this room would not find any fault with that as a kind of principle. Now, since 2024, we've seen examples of this kind of enhanced liberalism, actually. There are good things that have happened over the last few years. We've seen the establishment of the Multidimensional Vulnerability Index, which is progressing. The outcomes at FFD4, whilst not perfect, were perhaps better than some of us might have feared. UNOC, the ICJ advisory opinion, of course. There are definitely examples of great things that are happening in the multilateral system. But equally, it's hard to escape the feeling, I think, that we're living through at least a partial return to a kind of self-help system in which great power politics increasingly determines and defines the contours of the international system. And I think the key question that we then have to ask ourselves, if that's true, is whether or not this is a temporary or permanent state, and what it means for the multilateral system on which those kinds of initiatives that I just mentioned depend. And I think in order to do this, we need to start thinking quite seriously again about hegemony in the international system. Now, this is an academic concept that you see thrown around quite a lot, the idea being that a hegemonic order is one in which there is one state that is so disproportionately powerful it is able to set the international rules of the game. And it seems to be the case that the US increasingly is unwilling to underwrite the post-1945 system that sustained its hegemony, certainly in the second half of the 20th century, potentially into the 21st. Now, there's been a long debate in the academic literature about hegemony, the extent to which the US is still truly hegemonic or not. Many people in the 1970s thought it was already in relative hegemonic decline. Others date the kind of decline of hegemony to the unipolar period after the collapse of the Soviet Union. People take different views on that. The point, I think, is that across all of the different dimensions of hegemonic power, and there are four, security, production, finance, knowledge, the US is no longer able to set the global rules of the game in the way that it could after 1945. Now, this is quite a conventional argument that you would read in much of the academic international relations literature. And certainly, I would say since the 1970s, but others would say over the last 20 years or so, the kind of power, the ability to exercise hegemony in the international system has really passed beyond any single state, whether or not it be the US. Now, this isn't to say, of course, that the US is not the most powerful state. It still is. It's demonstrably the most powerful state across all of those four dimensions, but it's no longer hegemonic. It's no longer able to set the rules of the game because it's so preponderantly powerful vis-a-vis the other major powers, and in particular, China. But there's a wider problem here as well, which is that hegemony isn't just about capacity. It isn't just about the ability to set the rules of the game. It's about will as well. It's about a desire to do so. And to my mind, the most striking feature of the last couple of years is that the US is no longer willing to support the international order in the way that it once did. So it neither has the capacity nor the will. And I think that's something that is quite troubling. Particularly troubling given that large parts of the world don't necessarily buy into the visions that are being produced about the world order that we're seeing in current times. So I think that then brings us to another question, which is, what does a post-hegemonic, post-liberal, multilateral order look like, and where does SIDS fit into it? So if we think again about the four different dimensions of hegemonic power that I just mentioned, think about security. Well, military spending is rising across the board. In global north countries in particular. There's increased contestation of the kind of sea lanes, both virtual and physical. And it seems to me that we're moving into a world where the security panorama is much, much more fluid and contested than it might have been in the past. When it comes to production, see increased reshoring, securitization of global value chains. We see the rise of what some people in academic political economy have called a new state capitalism, i.e. the emergence of highly interventionist states seeking to dominate particular supply chains, whether they be kind of military supply chains or commercial supply chains. In the financial sphere, we see US dollar hegemony potentially under threat. There's an open question as to whether the current kind of tariff situation is perpetuating that or whether it's a reflection of it. And in the knowledge sphere, we see truth itself contested in a way that it perhaps hasn't been in the past. And I think underpinning and bubbling away under all of this is the kind of emergence of artificial intelligence and the significance of that for the future control of ideas within the international system. We may also be about to witness a spectacular collapse of the financial bubble around AI as well, and I'll leave that just as an open question. So this is quite a bleak picture in many ways, but I'm going to suggest some implications of this that we might just want to think about briefly. Firstly, I think the kinds of politics that we're seeing emerging, in particular the US at the moment, the kind of the MAGA agenda, I think this is a symptom of waning US hegemony. I don't think it, at least in the first instance, is necessarily the cause, but I don't think we can necessarily be seduced by the comfortable idea that a democratic president or a democratic Congress would necessarily turn the clock back. A lot of the things that we're seeing in terms of the kind of interventionism in particular date back to at least Biden and before Biden as well. So there is a structural change taking place that is broader, I think, than any particular kind of individual political project. We're seeing the rise, I think, also of great power tension, increasingly visible in spaces where it was not in the past. I spent a large part of my career at the University of the West Indies and living in the Caribbean. One thing that seemed remarkable to me maybe 15 years ago is that the US didn't really seem that bothered about the extent to which China was spreading into the region economically. I think that has now started to change, and the events of the last few weeks vis-a-vis Venezuela really raises the question of whether or not the Caribbean continues to be a zone of peace in the way that we may have previously thought it would be. And, you know, are we seeing the kinds of things that we're used to seeing in the Pacific increasingly emerging in other regions? I think we're also entering a new north-south political era, declining development assistance, the emergence of exceptionally powerful and wealthy private oligarchies, the dominance of particularly the knowledge infrastructures of the world by these really problematic, powerful, inordinately powerful figures is something I think we need to be concerned about. And then at the same time, the notion of the SIDS special case, which I'm sure all of us have experienced in different ways recently, the notion of a SIDS special case for sustainable development increasingly under threat. And I think that's something that forms a core part of our conversations over the next couple of days. And I haven't even mentioned the climate. We're in the process of experiencing intensifying climate change, overshoot, tipping points, 1.5 degrees C being breached, which is something that is kind of dwarfs many of the other problems I think that we face. So I think we're living in quite bleak times, potentially, but I'm going to end on a kind of a hopeful note. I don't think any of this is inevitable. The division of the world into imperialist blocks, the return of a self-help system is not inevitable. Multilateralism still exists. Many people in this room work in multilateral institutions. And the politics of those processes are things that we as kind of citizens can push in more hopeful, auspicious directions. And I think all of this only makes it more, not less imperative that we find solutions to the things that we can control over the next few days in our deliberations. So I'll be taking copious notes that feed into the conclusion chapter to the State of SIDS reports, as everybody in this room hopefully provides us with some great answers to those challenges. Thanks.
Thanks, Matt. That's a lot of food for thought there as well. So I'll now hand over to Alana Seed, who's IOSIS Chair and Permanent Representative of Palau to the United Nations in New York. Over to you, Alana. Thank you.
Excellencies, colleagues, and friends, it's a pleasure to join this timely conversation on navigating the now. For SIDS, the now is a period of profound transition marked by uncertainty and heightened risk, but also by renewed urgency and opportunity. When we gathered at the 4th International Conference on Small Island Developing States, we adopted the Antigua and Barbuda Agenda for SIDS. Yet, in the 2 years since SIDS 4, the global context in which ABAS must be implemented has shifted dramatically. We're witnessing intensified geopolitical fragmentation, protracted conflicts, worsening climate impacts, mounting debt vulnerabilities, and deepening distrust across the multilateral system itself. At the same time, the multilateral system itself is undergoing reform, including through initiatives such as UN 80, which are reshaping how the UN delivers, prioritizes, and finances its work. These changes undeniably shape the pathway to achieving ABAS, and they require SIDS to navigate with deliberate clarity, adaptability, and collective resolve. Let me address first the new opportunities and challenges have emerged and what this means for SIDS. On the challenge side, the global environment has become more constrained. Development finance is increasingly fragmented, risk-averse, and stretched across competing global priorities. Fiscal space for many SIDS has narrowed, even as climate shocks grow more frequent and more severe. Budget cuts, institutional reforms, and questions about the reliability and predictability of international cooperation place further pressure on the system. For SIDS, these dynamics pose a real risk that long-standing structural vulnerabilities are further exacerbated, while hard-won commitments, including those made at SIDS 4, face delays, dilution, or worse, unfulfillment. But alongside these challenges, new opportunities are emerging. There's growing recognition that traditional development metrics, particularly income-based classifications, do not capture vulnerability, resilience, or exposure to shocks. This has elevated the relevance of the multidimensional vulnerability index and more broadly, the case for tailored vulnerability responsive approaches to development cooperation. We also see momentum around debt reform and innovative financing instruments, climate resilient investments, and South-South cooperation. Importantly, SIDS are no longer viewed only as recipients of support, but also as drivers of solutions. Leaders in ocean governance, climate adaptation, renewable energy, and resilience building. For SIDS, this moment calls for strategic positioning to ensure ABAS is implemented as a living agenda that responds to today's realities, not yesterday's assumptions. And this leads me to the second question. What can SIDS do to adapt to and capitalize on these substantial global changes? First, SIDS must continue to act collectively. In an increasingly fragmented world, unity remains our greatest strength. Through AOSIS, we amplify our voice, defend multilateral norms, and ensure that SIDS priorities remain visible and credible across negotiating spaces. Second, SIDS must be agile in implementation. ABAS gives us a comprehensive roadmap, but its delivery will be essential. We must prioritize actions that build resilience now, whether through early warning systems or disaster risk financing, while keeping sight of long-term structural transformation. In this regard, the establishment of the SIDS Center of Excellence is a critical step forward. It provides a platform for peer learning, technical support, and the sharing of SIDS-led solutions that are informed by our own experiences, our own knowledge, and our own innovation. Third, SIDS must continue to shape the narrative. This means engaging proactively with international financial institutions, development partners, and the private sector to align ABAS implementation with evolving global reforms on finance, debt, and climate action. Finally, SIDS must invest in partnerships that deliver. In a context of uncertainty, partnerships grounded in trust, accountability, and mutual benefit will be critical. ABAS is not about promises, it's about implementation, and implementation depends on sustained political will on all sides. This brings me to the third question: what are UN OHR LLS, UN DESA, and AOSIS doing to support SIDS through these changes SIDS 4? Let me begin with AOSIS. AOSIS continues to serve as the political anchor for SIDS within the multilateral system. Since SIDS 4, we've focused on safeguarding the integrity of ABAS, advancing coordinated advocacy across UN processes, and ensuring coherence between ABAS and parallel global reforms, particularly on development finance, vulnerability, and resilience. AOSIS is also actively engaging in follow-up and review processes, including through the development of monitoring and accountability mechanisms to ensure that commitments translate into measurable outcomes for SIDS. A key part of this effort is advancing the Abbas monitoring and evaluation framework, which will help track progress, strengthen accountability, and ensure that implementation remains responsive to the evolving needs and realities of SIDS. In implementation, UN-OHR LLS and UN-DESA play distinct yet complementary roles. UN-OHR LLS is central to maintaining momentum on Abbas implementation through advocacy and ensuring that SIDS priorities remain integrated across UN action. UN-DESA continues to provide the analytical backbone for implementation by supporting evidence-based policymaking and advancing work on vulnerability and resilience. Together, AOSIS, UN-OHR LLS, and UN-DESA form a complementary ecosystem of political leadership, coordination, and technical support that must be preserved and strengthened in the face of global uncertainty. In closing, let me offer a final reflection. Navigating the now is not about waiting for stability to return. For SIDS, stability has never been guaranteed. Instead, our strength lies in our ability to adapt, to lead, to insist that global systems work for those most exposed to their failures. Abbas remains our collective compass. The task before us is to ensure that even amidst these geopolitical shifts and systemic change, that we stay the course, turning commitments into action, vulnerability into resilience, and uncertainty into opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Alana. That's great. I really like that last paragraph about the collective compass and, yeah, the ability to adapt and lead. So I'm now going to hand over to Kamal Kishore, who is the Special Representative of the United Nations Secretary General for Disaster Risk Reduction and Head of the United Nations Office for Disaster Risk Reduction. So over to you, Kamal. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and very happy to be here again in Wilton Park for this very important conversation. I think after that masterful backgrounder and perspective from yourselves, Palau and AOSIS, I don't know what else I can say. I think, of course, a lot has changed since Abbas was adopted 2 years ago. The money is not just not growing, it's actually going down. The world is divided along many lines, very difficult to find consensus on even some of the most sensible things. But having said that, I think this is the time to not give up and give in to cynicism. There is a lot of success to celebrate. Let's talk about Jamaica and Hurricane Melissa. Of course, the losses are enormous in several $1 billion. But at the same time, the wind speed that Melissa brought was 1/4 the speed of sound. 1/4 the speed of sound. And mortality was in 2 digits. Of course, it should have been 0. But the same event, if it had occurred 15 years ago, it would have caused havoc in terms of loss of lives. So the investment that Jamaica made through its own initiative, resourcefulness in early warning has really paid off. We've got to celebrate that. All of the parishes of Jamaica are part of Making Cities Resilient campaign that we run, my office runs, using their own resources. So it's really important to recognize what SIDS are doing for themselves and how they are not waiting for the world to turn up and have a more just system or really address climate justice in a comprehensive way. So with that background, I have 5 things to say. I think when the big winds are unfavorable, you have to see what you can do in that context. And the first is, it's really important that we build on local action that is taking place in the SIDS. As part of my job, I travel to SIDS a lot. I've been to Vanuatu, I've been to, of course, Antigua and Barbuda, St. Martin, Samoa, Fiji, Kiribati. And I'm really struck by the local innovation that is taking place there, whether it is developing homegrown solutions for providing insurance cover to dairy farmers in Fiji, or bundled insurance for people in Samoa, or upgrading building codes in Maldives, for example. They are doing a lot. So our work on building resilience has to have that as the starting point. We have to build on what is being done locally. The second point I want to make is that there is some support available through various mechanisms which is suboptimally utilized. Let me highlight one, which is the Santiago network. UNDRR and UNOPS are the co-hosts of the Secretariat of Santiago network. Until a few months ago, there was only one country that had a proposal in. We need to have a flood of proposals into Santiago network seeking technical assistance to build resilience there. How are we going to drum up that? What is the kind of support we need to provide? How do we come up with a good method of working alongside SIDS, accompanying them in their journey so that these facilities are fully utilized? In the Early Warning for All initiative, in the first cohort of 30 countries, 12 were small island developing states. We have to really make sure that what we are doing on early warning there is really the best possible. Early last year, we were able to unlock financing for early warning from the Green Climate Fund for the first time. They have now, it's easier to access large amounts of money, relatively large amounts of money to do that. But my point here is that it is really important that what we have, it is hardly adequate, but it is really not yet fully utilized. We really have to maximize its use, and really, the secretariats of these facilities should be really sweating that, they have too much work. So that's the second point. The third point I want to make is that when in a resource-constrained environment, it's really important that we have an integrated approach to risk and resilience. It's no longer feasible to look at climate adaptation separately from disaster risk reduction. A comprehensive risk management approach is really essential. And here, I have to say that much before the rest of the world was talking about it, SIDS were actually talking about this integration out of necessity, because they don't have time to do fragmented things. So, but we really need to take it to yet another level. My fourth point is that there is the title of this meeting has Big Ocean Blue Economy. I think that's really wonderful. However, if we have to make the most of the economic opportunity there, we have to make big investment in resilience as well. From an ocean's perspective, not just from the land perspective. Let me just highlight that with an example. Kiribati is clearly a big ocean state. Its exclusive economic zone, its geographical area is, I think, 2% larger than the geographical area of India. And it has got 8 weather stations. How can you predict what the weather is going to do over the ocean with just 8 weather stations? You need to predict weather not just on land, but also marine heat wave on sea if you want to exploit the economic opportunity of the ocean. So I think it's really important that that investment is made. And my final point, fifth and final point, is that I am pinning a lot of hope on COP31, where, as far as I know, there are plans to do a pre-COP in one of the Pacific island states. I think there is momentum there. I think let's make the most of it. For me at UNDRR, my dream would be that all the SIDS, by the time we go to COP31, have strong proposals in the Santiago network, for example, to access technical support to invest in resilience. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Kamal. That was great. I'm now going to turn to our final speaker in this session, which is Sai Navati, the Chief of the SIDS Unit at the United Nations Department of Economic and Social Affairs. Thank you, Sai. You're very welcome.
Thank you kindly, Tina. Tina, on behalf of the Department of Economic and Social Affairs, Under Secretary General Mr. Lee Junhua, who expresses most sincere apology to you and to the members of the forum this afternoon for not being able to be with us. He has sent me here to participate. So we would like to express our appreciation for the invitation. The right to development is a right by member states for their citizens. Organizations, international or regional, were created by them, member states, to assist them realize those rights. The role of the United Nations Department of Economic and Social Affairs and the SIDS unit was well articulated by Her Excellency, the Chair of the Alliance of Small Island States, and I will not repeat it, although after hearing it, I must express my full support to the call that she made, that the organs of support to the SIDS that exist within the United Nations, the Alliance of Small Island States, the Office of the High Representative, and the SIDS unit of the UNDESA should be supported and continue to be supported. The danger for the SIDS agenda, the real danger is, in the next 20 years or so, it's not that it will disappear now. The danger is that it exists without power. And this is the type of conversation that we should start looking at into the future, whether we, as a group of people from vulnerable countries, we still have the collective power to influence whatever discussion is taking place in the world, when the powerful are now flexing their muscles. So on behalf of DESA, there are 3 points that I was requested to impart, and this is what I was sent to say. First, vulnerability to strategic contribution. SIDS agenda must now, the SIDS themselves in this world and the changes that we are experiencing should increasingly highlight the positive contributions of these small islands to the world. And we should embark on that. Second, implementation. Now, this is a matter that has been said many a times by the small island states. We translate ambition to action. And again, this afternoon, the chair of the Alliance of Small Island States has mentioned those. I will not repeat it. Third and last point, we ensure that the global system works for SIDS. For 40 years, if you just look behind us for the last 40 years, there is international political consensus that we are a special case for development. The question is, where is the special treatment? Whose duty is it to identify those treatment? And whose duty it is to assist the SIDS get the treatment so that they can move out from their vulnerability, so that the vision of the Antigua and Barbuda for SIDS, resilience, prosperity, could be realized. Thanks.